happy to take questions at the end. Restarting recording and sharing my screen over here for everyone who has joined right now. Today we're discussing, where's that newest first? There we go. Monitoring, logging, and specifically we're going to learn about this thing called New Relic. One second. Something is up here. Let me pin myself. Let me make this smaller. Alrighty. Monitoring, logging, and New Relic. We'll understand what these terms mean, and one paid service that's not very heavily paid, New Relic, that lets you do it. And then tomorrow we'll look at a few free open source tools that let you do the same thing. This is a very commonly done thing in companies. This is not commonly done it's still done in startups. It's not done, when you're building your own kiddie project. Just like you don't write tests from time to time, you usually don't do logging, monitoring, and alerts. It's a thing you do way down the line when your company is too big. And by too big, I mean you have a lot of users. When you have a lot of users, you need to make sure if there's a problem in your system, there is no user that is calling you and telling you, sir, I'm not able to visit your website. This is the problem I'm seeing. You should be able to monitor your systems. And if anything is down, you should be able to ping an engineer. You should be able to call an engineer. The engineer should wake up and fix what the issue is. These are practices that commonly happen in Series A plus companies. There is usually a team that's handling all of this. DevOps team usually handles this. So there's not a new specific team. But if your company has, 20 sub teams, let's say this is the video team, and then this is the backend team, and then this is the front end team, and then one more maybe, real time backend team, so on and so forth. Companies have a lot of teams, and the website, whenever it goes down, if let's say this is the final product of the company, let's call it google.com, whenever it goes down, some system of it might go down. For example, the system that is owned by this backend team might go down, or the system that is owned by the real-time backend team might go down. And whenever that happens, we want whoever is on call, I repeat, whoever is on call on this specific team needs to be woken up. On call is a commonly used jargon in the industry, which means if there's a team of 10 people, every 2 weeks, 2 people will be on call. What does being on call mean? It means if things go down, you'll be called, you'll be the first line of defense. You will receive a call most probably, or get paged. In very big companies like Google, I think they have a machine that they give you. In most startups, they'll just call you. And you're the one who has to wake up, doesn't matter what time is it, because the system went down. Of course, this is not too much, as you can see. It's like once every 5 weeks you're on call. There's a low probability of systems going down. But if they do, the on-call wakes up. If the on-call doesn't wake up, then it goes to their manager. If the manager doesn't wake up, they're also sleeping. Then it goes to the CTO, so on and so forth. It keeps going up the chain. You can build systems like these. If the first person, if the on-call did not acknowledge the incident, is not working on it by clicking a button, their manager would get called. If they also did not acknowledge it, the CTO would get called. And then of course, if the CTO did not pick it up, then okay, the system is down. This is what we'll try to understand today. How do you build systems like these? How do you monitor the products you have built? We won't be coding too much. We'll code a little bit, but the primary focus would be once you've written an Express application, what are the metrics you tend to track, and how do you make sure your systems aren't down? Logging, monitoring, alerts, and status pages. Logging refers to the practice of recording events, messages, or data points generated by software applications and systems. These logs can include various types of informations like error messages. If your app throws an error, if your app does a console.err or something went wrong, something like this. If your app does this, then it would be nice. It's not hung in some terminal. If right now you look at the logs of, let's say, projects.100xsteps.com, how do I look at them? I go here, I SSH into a terminal. Then I do PM2 logs, whatever the process ID is. Then I'm able to look at all of the logs. What went wrong? I have to read through them. I cannot search through them. I can if I want to, open it in Vim, but there's no nice GUI for me to search based on labels. Logging here refers to whatever error messages are coming, we will throw in some very fancy UI. You can go to that UI and pick it up. Access logs, a lot of times, again, in very big companies, just I just SSH into this root machine. This should alert someone, should put a Slack message ki Harkirat SSH'd into the global database, so that there is an audit log generally ki who is going into a server, who is coming out of a server. General audit logs for compliance security purposes. These are logging. The first one is the most primary use case. More visibility into the logs of your system. That is one thing we learn. Second thing is monitoring. This involves continuously observing the system, basically making sure, is the CPU usage going high, going low. A lot of times you might have seen the website is down. What happens? 99% of the time what happens is the space over here fills up. If I do a df-h here, you'll see 84% of the system is filled up. So, a lot of times logs keep on piling up, and this reaches 100%, and then people aren't able to visit a website. Hence, these are things, again, you should be alerted on. 90% of your machine has been filled. Please clean it up or run some process, but you need a place to tell you rather than end users telling you something is not working, and then you figuring out what is wrong, and eventually landing at the fact that there is not enough space on my machine. Memory usage, disk IO, space that you have, network traffic. Do you have a lot of traffic that's coming in? Good indication of a DDoS. Just generally making sure is this system enough, is this server enough to handle this much traffic? So incoming traffic, outgoing traffic, disk IOs, how much are you writing on disk, how much are you reading from disk? All of these should appear as very nice graphs somewhere like this. That is the goal of today. Okay, given you have a system and the system is running a server of yours, how can you create a very nice system like this using a paid service? Tomorrow we'll do using open source services. Now open source services are also paid. You still have to host them on AWS, but they are significantly cheaper at scale, because as you self-host, it's not as much money, versus these companies have a very big markup. Datadog is like a huge publicly traded company, purely because this is a good market. Every big company needs monitoring constantly, and once they move to Datadog, let's say, once they have all of their systems there, all of their existing data there, it's very hard to move away from Datadog. Lastly, we'll understand about status pages, alerts. Oh yeah, maybe one more thing is alerting. It is one thing to put logs somewhere. It is one thing to have a dashboard like this. It is a third thing to have some thresholds. This is the CPU usage. If it goes above this point, please call the on-call engineer. That is what alerting means. That is the third thing we have to learn. When there are logging and monitoring systems in place, you can put up alerts to be called, messaged, slacked, paged. When the system goes down, CPU usage goes up beyond a point, error count goes up, 100 different things. Here also, there is a very big company. I think these guys were acquired by another very big company called PagerDuty, if you've heard of it, which, as the name suggests, pages you, has very nice calendars you can create for all your employees. Okay, this person is on call here. This person is on call in this week. This person went on a holiday, so the other person became on call, so on and so forth. So as useless as this might look like as an early engineer, these are super important and highly underrated in terms of how much your response time goes down in case your system is ever down. You will have bugs. You will also have bugs in production. Doesn't matter how many tests you put. Machine filled up. Doesn't matter how good your code is. If your machine filled up, your systems will go down. This is highly underrated in terms of the visibility that it gives you on all of your systems. Okay, bhai, what exactly is happening? There's no empty box running anywhere. There is a pretty UI that a lot of times companies just have an LED where this is running. So, engineers can look at it from time to time. Cool. Lastly, all of these systems are for you, for the developers. But you might have seen this status pages from time to time. Whenever AWS goes down, they say go to status.amazon.com, and you see a page like this. We also have a page like this called status.100steps.com, which will tell you that abhi the website is down, abhi the website is up. We'll understand how can you create a page like this. There are some paid ways, there are some free ways, there are some open source libraries that let you do the same thing. That will be the last thing we learn today. This is a brief of what we're going to do. Very minimal coding. We'll start from logging, then go to monitoring, then alerts, and lastly create some status pages. We'll do a little bit of coding. One extra thing you'll learn about is the Winston logger in TypeScript, JavaScript. This is generally good to know, not just needed for monitoring. But other than that, it's going to be highly theoretical. Create some dashboards with me kind of a class. Let's get right into it. As I said, There are two types of services like these. Most companies, when they start here. They start even CloudWatch. If you remember, if you've gone through the Amazon dashboard when you've maybe hopefully created an EC2 machine, here also you will notice that whatever instance you are running, for example, I'm running this instance called test, there is a section called monitoring. So it's not like Datadog brought something new. Most cloud providers already have this, but since the focus of the cloud provider isn't the monitoring section, it's other things, it is slightly less pretty, I would say. It's still feature compatible with New Relic or Datadog. As Datadog, New Relic became big, these guys also have similarly, you can put alerts, you can message someone, call someone, whatever. But it's not cloud independent. Firstly, what if you want to deploy on DigitalOcean also, as well as on AWS? Then you won't be able to put up these alerts or see these visualizations for the DigitalOcean machine. That will have a different interface. And hence, even though these do provide you with monitoring systems of your own, be it GCP, DigitalOcean or AWS, generally you use a company that dedicatedly does monitoring and is not a cloud provider. Datadog is one such company. This one is extremely expensive at scale. I've seen bills of $100K for a company that eventually moved from here to here. New Relic, I think their selling point is that you just pay us for the data. Eventually, I could be wrong. Maybe they have a different pricing model, but I think that's what they finalized for that company. Okay, if you are all of this is data in some tables, right? You have this CPU usage as this time. All of this is time series data. So I think, and I could be wrong, but the pricing of New Relic folks is, if you keep 3 months worth of data, you pay X. If you keep 8 months, you pay Y. And I think some members based cost. If you add 100 members, you pay some per member fee, something like that. But from what my knowledge from 3 years ago, when I used these systems, this is cheaper than this. And there are a bunch of other open source alternatives. I'm hoping / assuming, other companies came priced down either further. When you have scale, you can, ask them to give you heavy discounts. Secondly, if you want to self-host, you always can. There are tools that, companies that are completely open source that you can bring their code, deploy on your own AWS machine, and then you have a Datadog-like service of your own. You don't have to use datadog.com or newrelic.com. You have your own service where you can log things. So that's what you choose from. Generally, New Relic is great. If you think you are going to blitzscale, in-house is the best, because moving from here to here can be a pain. So good idea to just do things in-house. But a lot of times you don't have time. You can get discounts here. You don't have a lot of scale. You have a lot of money, so you don't care. In all of these cases, using an external service is fine. We're going to be using New Relic. We'll be setting up 3 things here: logging, monitoring, and alerting, and creating some dashboards. Yeah, that's pretty much it. At this point, I would urge you to, if you want to, try it out. This is fairly simple stuff, so you can follow along. We don't even have to go through the slides. We can directly go to New Relic and start to monitor some system. If you want, you can monitor your own machine. That is not a good idea to give New Relic access to your own current machine you're on and let them monitor your Mac machine. Ideally, get an instance here on AWS, on DigitalOcean, on Vultr. Vultr gives you one for free if you use Vultr free trial. If you go here, I'm assuming they give like a $200 credit. Doesn't matter where, create a machine and then let's start to monitor that machine. Don't monitor your Mac machine. It's just too much things. Yeah, just don't give them access to your machine. They get a lot of low level access, which is something you don't want to give to, for your personal laptop. Let's go to newrelic.com. Let's sign in, and let me do that for a fresh account as well. And then we'll go from there. Let me show you where we'll be at by the end of the class. By the end of the class, you'll have a bunch of dashboards like these. For example, I've created one called system breakpoints, or where does the system break, which shows you the memory usage. This probably is the CPU usage. The storage, if you remember, it said 83%. I showed you a while back. 84% is full. That is exactly what I can track on this dashboard as well. And I can put some alerts here if this reaches 95%. A bunch of other things here. But we'll do it from scratch on, a fresh machine. So I'll probably log out here and create a fresh account. Would urge you to do the same on newrelic.com. 2 minutes and then let's meet. All right, I just signed up with a whoopsie daisy. No user sign up. There we go. Signing up for a fresh account. Thankfully, these guys make on-ramping very easy. By on-ramping, I mean, it'll take you less than 10 minutes to set up your first set of monitors and, bring your instance up to date with monitoring. So let's see how they do it. As soon as you sign up front, it gives you a warning. I'll wait for a minute and then I'll proceed. Just so that the people who haven't signed up, sign up as well. As soon as you sign up, you should see the screen. I'll wait here for like 30 seconds. Until then, let me maybe look at chat if there is any question. Open chat. Why does everyone say on-call is a nightmare? What is Terraform used for? People say on-call is a nightmare because you have to be up if the systems go down. A lot of times there is a team where the system is going down every time, so people just dread on-call. Terraform is used for infrastructure as code, very different to what we're doing today. That lets you describe your infrastructure in files. Useful if you want to move between cloud providers, not useful for what we're doing today. All right. I think we will proceed here. No more questions related to the class. Any other questions? We can defer to 8:30ish when we'll be free. Alrighty. So let's select our stack. Right now we have no application. We're going to create a fresh EC2 machine most probably, and hence we're not monitoring any application. As you saw the options that were present here, we're not monitoring any application yet. What we're monitoring is a simple Ubuntu or a Linux machine. So you can select Linux here. If you don't have an EC2 machine, a VM somewhere, you can select Mac over here. And one second. Sorry about that. You can select Mac. You can run these things on your system as well. Everything, the steps will be the same. It's just a little scary to do that, at least for me, because they get too much access. You can select logging or infrastructure and OS. Either is fine. Infrastructure and OS is what we should start from. And then it asks, seems like the wrong one actually. Linux. Next. Then it asks you to create a password, a secret that you need to keep safe. If you don't keep this safe, then someone else can take this key, put it on their machine, and you'll start to see their logs. So whatever key you create here is a secret that you should keep safe. To copy it and just keep it here for now. Continue. And then it says install the infrastructure agent for Linux. Run this command. And thankfully that's all you have to do. This is the same command you can run on your Mac machine. It will give you a similar command. But as soon as you run this command, they are now constantly listening to CPU usage, a bunch of things on your machine. So be sure if you want to do that or not. Next, I want to first create a VM where I can actually deploy, or the thing that I can monitor. So I'm going to create one on AWS. As I said, you can create one on Vultr. They give you $200 credits. I'm unsure if you need to put a credit card there. My guess is you don't, but I could be wrong. Let me launch a fresh instance here. Call it monitor machine, Ubuntu, and everything else should be, doesn't matter. Existing key pair and launch. If this was a little too fast, this is just me launching a machine on AWS, which we have done a few times already. If you don't have access to AWS, you won't be able to. And it's a long process to get AWS access, so don't try. Just run it on your own machine, it's fine. This is a machine that's now coming up, a fresh EC2 machine. What is EC2, Harkirat? Elastic Compute 2, basically a virtual machine. I'm going to deploy some Node.js code there and start to monitor it. Would urge you to do the same. Get a small box somewhere. DigitalOcean, you can get it for $5. Vultr, you get a bunch of credits, so you can get it for free. And I think even GCP gives you $300 worth of credits. So just pick one and start a machine. The cloud provider does not matter. AWS, there's a class called deploying backends to AWS where you'll see all of this. You need to give credit card details in Walter, it seems. I'm thinking if there's another place where you can get a VM for free. But unfortunately, if there would be a place, it would just shut down very quickly because people would just abuse it. So yeah, you can do today's class a little bit, mostly. Yeah, there's no coding. So as long as you understand the things that I'm talking about, you should be fine. All right. I brought up a fresh machine. To recap the steps: launch instance, select an operating system, for me, that is Ubuntu. Key pair login. If you have not done this before, here are the steps. You can create a new key pair. You can select RSA here is fine. PEM here, it's fine. And click on create new key pair. Give it a name, week 25 for me. And it will download a file for you. This file is your access to your server. If you lose this file, if your friend has it, then your friend can access your machine. So keep this very safe. And then click on launch instance with the right key pair over here. This size is fine. Just make sure Ubuntu is the operating system. And then once the machine does start, when you click on launch instance, a machine should start. For example, this monitor machine started for me. It says initializing over here, which means it's still starting. But once it does, it will give you this URL that you can use to connect to it. Let me try connecting to the new machine that I have just created. The key pair that I had put was kirath-mumbai.pem. So this is the command that I will run. If you had a different key pair, make sure you're in the folder in which the key pair is there. For example, where did I download the key pair? It's in my downloads folder. So if you downloaded it, make sure your terminal is also in the downloads folder and then run this command. It will give you an error if this is the first time you're doing it. So make sure you run this command as well. chmod space 700 space the name of your PEM file. The last name should be your PEM file, not week 22 AWS class. We did the same in week 22, which is why you see this here, but it should be called, whatever your PEM file is. Run this command first and then try to SSH into the machine, try to secure shell into the machine. Once you do, your terminal should go from a blue thing right here or whatever you had to a green thing like this, which means you are now connected to that AWS machine. It is a fresh AWS machine, has nothing right now. I can create a folder if need be, or install Node.js, do things like these. But for now, it is a completely empty machine, has nothing. Are we good to go from here? Do some of you have a machine? Should I wait? So just let me know. Are we good to go, guys? Yes or no? Oh, okie. Think we're good to go. 88% is great. Let's install the New Relic agent on this machine. If you remember the steps, as soon as I came onto Datadog, or as soon as I signed up on Datadog, it made me go through these instructions. Hey, what do you want to install? We have a bunch of services. What do you want to monitor? And I said, I just want to monitor my infrastructure for now, my Linux machine. Next, it is a Linux machine, not a macOS machine. Created a fresh key and then install the agent by running this command. You should see a similar command, run it. And this is pretty much it. This is all you have to do to start the New Relic agent. And whenever you have a company which has, let's say, 1,000 instances out there, or if you're using Kubernetes, you have 3 different clouds where you have a bunch of servers. All of these servers will need to have this New Relic agent running. This agent, very small process that runs, is what talks to New Relic and tells it, hey, this is the CPU usage. These are the logs for this Node.js process, so on and so forth. One second. So even if you use, let's say, an auto scaling group in AWS, if you remember, we did that a few weeks ago, you will make sure that the image of that auto scaling group has the agent, so that whenever the machine starts, the agent starts with it. The New Relic agent is running on every machine of yours on which your final code would be running. Right now, though, I manually added it by running the command they gave me. And wow, it also installed a bunch of alerts by default. You can say no here as well, but their agent says, okay, I will monitor and I will also create a few alerts for you. Adding an alert for high CPU usage, adding an alert for high application error percentage, so on and so forth. We will eventually see these in the New Relic dashboard as well. So what was I saying? It doesn't matter if you're using Kubernetes, whatever. If you're using New Relic as your final monitoring system, you will have to run the agent here. That's the only thing you have to do. This agent now has access to your machine and hence can send the CPU usage stats to New Relic. It has to send other things. We'll see how it actually sends the process logs, things like these. But before that, all the data, if I now click on continue here, it'll try to test the connection and it says infrastructure agent is successfully installed. A bunch of standard alerts are already installed. If you click on continue and go back to your New Relic dashboard now, so close everything. You should now see a new entity in New Relic. What are entities will come to very soon. But New Relic has this concept of, okay, what do you want to monitor? Do you want to monitor a complete host, a full machine? That's exactly what we want to monitor. And you see that here. Do you want to monitor a single service there, a Node.js process there? Do you want to monitor containers? Do you have a Docker process running that you want to monitor? So on and so forth. Each one of these, it's called an entity. What is the entity that we are monitoring right now? It is this EC2 machine. If we wait for a bit, we'll see all the standard stats that this machine possesses. For example, CPU usage, memory usage, storage, things like these. Let's wait for like a minute and these should begin to appear. It's as easy as that. There's not a lot of overhead. These agents are built in a way that, they do a lot of bulk sending. They make sure they're not overwhelming your EC2 machine. Your EC2 machine, they'll use like a very small CPU percentage there. If you look at it now, you can see very small CPU percentage being used, very little memory usage, so on and so forth. You can actually spike this up if you want to run a quick experiment and make sure things are actually running. Let's do a quick experiment. But before that, let me quickly recap what have we done. We are discussing about monitoring, logging, and a bunch of other things. The first thing we did was we thought let's monitor our systems, and hence we created an account on New Relic. Then we created a fresh EC2 machine. Then we installed the New Relic agent over there. And now that agent is sending over the stats from the machine here. As you can see, it says 2.7% CPU. Harkeerat, we already had this. If you go to the instances over here, monitoring, this was already there. Yes. But as I said, New Relic is a generic service you can use across cloud providers versus AWS. If you use CloudWatch, if you use this, then you're restricted to the machines that are in AWS. They will use this. Other machines, DigitalOcean will use DigitalOcean's monitoring system, so on and so forth. Now let's try to see if it actually does what it's supposed to do, even though it should be obvious. But let's create a infinite for loop and see does the CPU spike up or not. So step one here is install Node.js on the machine. Install Node.js Linux. This is a popular DigitalOcean blog post that I almost always follow, or just Google. It's not too difficult to install Node.js. This is a third option over here that I am using, which is installing Node using the Node version manager. Let me ask a question before I proceed. How many of you are also doing this with me? Are you also doing this with me on your own EC2 machine? Yes or no? Okay. Small percentage is doing. 25% is doing, 75 is not doing. So okay, for the people who are doing, I'll go a little bit slower, but then not too slow since most people just want to see and then we'll eventually do it on their side. I'm installing Node.js. This is the command. I run it. Node.js installs. I have to source the bash rc file. So .bash rc file. And then I can install node nvm install latest. Should install the latest version of node or no. Let's just do 20. nvm install version 20 will install Node.js version 20 on my machine, and then I can do I can run npm now, which means node is now running on my machine. Let's create an empty index.js file here. After we have installed a node, how do we know node is running? Just run npm. If it gives you this log, means you're good to go. I'm going to create an index.js file where I'll create a empty for loop, which pretty much does nothing. I've written slightly fancier code just to make sure this doesn't run out of memory very quickly. If you keep doing C++, it'll run out of memory at some point. But if you do this, C++ only will run 10% of the times. You can make this number even smaller. We just want an infinite loop to keep running. You can also, create an array over here and keep appending to the array, and you will see the memory usage spike up as well. But if you just do this much, even if you don't put this mat.random, let's just keep it very simple. If you just do this much, C equal to C+1 in an infinite for loop. If you save this file and run index.js, you will see, of course, in a minute, not immediately, you'll see the CPU spike up. As I said, these stats are delayed by a little. It's not immediately sending everything to New Relic. They send it in batches to make sure it doesn't overwhelm your machine, and hence, in a minute or two, you should see this CPU usage spike up. That's a brief of monitoring your system by using New Relic. You can do this for a really long time for free. If you have, 1, 2, 3 machines, this gets expensive when you have 20 machines, 30 machines. If you have a Kubernetes cluster that's running on, 3 clouds with 100 machines, is when New Relic will get expensive, and because now they're keeping track of a lot of things. For a single machine, it just works. Like, you don't have to pay for a long time. If you look at it, CPU usage is going up, and how far up does it go? It goes up to 54%, which sounds right because 2-core machine, I think this is a 2-core machine. It's a 1-core machine, so it will reach 100 eventually. If we wait for a bit, this should probably go up to 100%, and that's expected. We'll wait, but either way, let me go back to the slides and try this on your side as well. What have we done? We have created our very first entity in New Relic, which is a host. Eventually, we'll be creating process entities. Here, I want to know this Node.js process ka stats. If I have 10 Node.js processes, I want to see logs of all the 10 Node.js processes. I want to see the response time. How much time does it take for a Node.js process request response to get returned, things like these. All of these are entities, which is the one that we have created. We have created a simple host entity for now. We're tracking its CPU usage, memory usage, so on and so forth. It gives you all the observability on the host. We have run this experiment. We created an index.js file with an infinite loop, and we saw the CPU usage here was 100%. This is a bigger machine, as you can see. So, here only this core is at 100%, but the machine that I just brought up is a 1-core machine. The only core that it has is running on 100% capacity now. If I now go here, you will see it's peaked to 100% because that's what the CPU is using right now. If I was appending to an array in this for loop, you would have seen the memory usage spike as well. In case of the big machine, when I created an infinite for loop, as you can see, it spiked up, but it did not spike up to 100%. Why? because only one core was at 100%. The other ones were at like 1-2%. It was a bigger machine, 8-core machine, and hence the net CPU usage was 16% and not 100%. But here in our machine, since it's a 1-core machine, net CPU usage has reached 100%. That's a brief of building the system. But the question is, number one, how do you build dashboards? This is actually fairly easy. But number two, how do you put up alerts? As you just saw, this thing spiked, yet I did not receive an email, did not receive a call. So how do you put up alerts? What are the kind of alerts you put up to make sure if your memory usage is, if your storage is reaching 100%, then you alerts a developer to clean it up, things like these. So first, let's create a dashboard. If you are following along, fairly straightforward. Here, this is New Relic provided dashboards. Every dashboard here is actually a query. If you right click here or like single click here and click on view query, you will see a query here at the bottom. It's very similar to SQL. If you read through it, what does it say? It says select average of the CPU percentage as this string right here, which is the string that appears over here, from system sample where entity ID or entity GUID is this thing, time series, which means create a time series chart out of it. Auto basically means I don't want for the last 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I can put 20 minutes ago here as well. Auto means just pick it up from here. Right now it says since 30 minutes ago. So it will pick up, the stat here will be for the past 30 minutes. If I make this 60 minutes, then the stats here will be for the past 60 minutes, so on and so forth. So this specific, every chart here is a query, and this is in a language called NRQL, which is New Relic's own query language. It's very similar to SQL, but can get complicated. Does sometimes you have to do not joins exactly, but you have to see multiple things here. We have a slide on this on NRQL and how do you write code there. But when you're in a company, this is the most challenging bit. Most of the times, thankfully, New Relic now gives you everything out of the box. But if you have a very twisted use case, you have to write this query yourself. And that's where a lot of challenge comes. So what have we learned? We have a bunch of these. This is a standard dashboard it created for us. It exists here in entities. But right next to it is a dashboards section. Here, you can create your own custom dashboards. You might want, I don't care about half of these stats. I only care about some. So you can create a fresh dashboard by clicking on create a dashboard and then give it a name, call it new EC2 machine stats. And here you can add a bunch of charts. How do you add a chart? Again, you can create a query, an NRQL query. You can write the whole thing yourself, whatever the select average of CPU percentage, so on and so forth, whatever that query was. Or you can just copy that specific query from here, view query, and then just copy it and then paste it in your dashboard. If I run this, you will see I see the same chart over here. This query is effectively hitting a database only. What is New Relic? It is a company that is now storing your CPU percentage for this specific host ID in some database, right? So this query is just asking that database, hey, give me a time series data of this specific server with the CPU percentage. If I click on save here, you will see the first chart appears. You can resize it, do a bunch of things with it. How do you resize this? I'm sure there's a way to make it prettier and suit your needs. If you want this to be longer, smaller, you can do that, pretty sure. And another way to move dashboards or whatever charts you need from here over to your own dashboard. Let's say you're also interested in the amount of space your machine has. You can just right click on add to dashboard, and that'll just add it in the dashboard. Just select the dashboard that you already have. Mine was called new EC2 machine stats. Click on copy and it'll just pretty much take the query there and create a fresh chart. Now if I go to my dashboard, I have two of these stats. I should have given this a name, but this is the CPU percentage. This is the storage that you have. You can customize this as you want. You can also create your own queries. If you want, I don't know, the CPU percentage averaged out in the last 30 minutes or the last 60 minutes, you can create your own chart here, write the query for it, which will, depending on the use case, be really hard. Maybe just give it to an AI and it'll figure it out. And create your own charts. You can also, eventually you might have multiple machines. So you might need, in a single chart, I want to see the stats for 2 of the machines. All those queries you can write. We'll be writing some of them ourselves very soon. That is how you create dashboards. The most important thing after this is creating alerts. Then I'm happy to take a break. But alerting means if this goes to 100%, give me a call. If it goes down to 0%, don't give me a call. So let me stop the infinite loop that was running. So the CPU usage here goes down. And let's try to create an alert, which you can do by right clicking here, create an alert condition. Oh fuck. That is Madhumakhi. Little distracted here. I think it went away. All right. What was I saying? Right click, create an alert condition, and then just go through the following steps. What is the query that you want an alert condition on? It is this only. I want the query to run on the average CPU percentage. Okay. That's what it looks like right now. Was 0 for a long time, increased to a very high number recently. Click on next. Here you set the threshold. At what point do you want a call to go out? At what point do you want a warning to be thrown, so on and so forth. So you can select, okay, if it goes above 50% for at least 5 minutes, then this is a critical level of security. And if it goes above, I don't know, 25% for at least 5 minutes, then it's a warning and it's not really a critical error. And then later on, you can set rules like, if it's a warning, send an email. If it's a critical error, then send a Slack message and call, so on and so forth. So you can set various thresholds. And as you can see the thresholds here. Okay, yellow is warning, red is critical. Click on next. Lastly, you have to create a policy. A policy basically means you can attach notifications to policies. Basically teams. If you have, if this is specific thing is owned by the backend team, you create a fresh policy for, let's say, main backend team, and then you can attach alerts to go out to the backend team on this one. This is to make sure alerts don't go out to everyone if a specific system goes down. If this thing is owned by the backend team, create a policy for the backend team and just notify them. Click on save and set up notifications. After you've named your condition, call it high CPU percentage, then click on save. Then it of course tells you, okay, please create a workflow to get notified. You have created an alert, but I don't know what to do with the alert. Who should I alert in case this specific policy is triggered? The answer is you can set up anything here. As I said, PagerDuty is a company that gives you very nice, add your employees there and then create on-call schedules that usually a manager does. Someone is on a holiday, you replace them, so on and so forth. Keep things simple. You can select Slack. Slack is also fairly obvious. You have an alerts group where all the alerts go. To keep things simple, we're going to use email for now. But this part you can customize very well. If there is one part alerting, there's the other part deciding where all to send the notification out. So where should you send this? Select whatever email you want. What was this? Aryan. What is the email on this account? Create a new destination. Okie dokie. Add an email address. There we go. Looks wrong. Let's do one that I can show. This is mine. And name the destination engineer1. Save. An error happened, but no one knows what the error was. Try this one more time. network, dismiss, save. Server error. An error is on this field. Which field? AI notification. All right, let's try that one more time. Created the alert. Added the details. We have the alert now. I don't think we have the destination set up just yet, but let's spike the alert. Let's see the alert here. It most probably is not going to send out an email because I wasn't able to set that up. Let's try it one more time if possible, but if not, we will just proceed without it and just see the alert here. You can also track the alerts on this dashboard. As you can see, it says this is an active issue. If you click on it, what does it say? It says this specific thing was breached. The CPU percentage went above 80%. This is the default alerts that they've created. If you remember, when I was installing New Relic, it had created a bunch of default alerts for us. If I go to alert conditions here, there is one that I just created, which is this one right here, high CPU percentage. But they also created some for us by default when we installed it on the machine. You can also decide not to. You can also delete them if need be. But this one was actually triggered. If you look here a few minutes ago, it's a critical error because 100% CPU is a little too much. The thing we need to fix is alert policies. I had created a single policy called my backend team. I need to add a bunch of people here. Notifications. We hit an error while fetching notifications. Settings. Seems like they don't monitor their own systems very well, or I'm missing something obvious here. Get notified notifications. Yeah, seems like this. Either their systems are down or I'm doing something very dumb. But most probably seems like something is up here. Does anyone know in chat already? If not, that's fine as well. I have another account where I've set this up so I can just show that and show an email from there. Anyone know anything? Same error. Oh, a lot of people are getting this error. Have we killed New Relic as well today? That'd be nice. Refresh. I would be super surprised if they are also not able to handle. There are like 400 people on a call right now. That is pretty funny. Okay, let me show you another account where hopefully this hasn't happened. It might have happened here as well. What's it called? New Relic. Let me show it. Basically, yeah, when this works, put an email there, connect your Slack there, press a few buttons, and you will get notified there. But let's see if I have something that I can show really quickly. If not, I can at the very least show the alert that I sent out a few minutes ago before the class and show you what it looks like. Let's see if I can find it. New Relic. There we go. You basically get an email like this. If you can see, let me stop sharing my screen. I don't want to share it on my machine because it'll show the other messages as well. But you get an email that looks like this. Okay, hey, this has high CPU usage triggered. And there's a button here called acknowledge. That's the first button over here. If you click on this button is when you're good to go and your manager will not be paged. If you don't click on this for 5 minutes or whatever is the threshold that is selected, which means you haven't acknowledged it, you haven't fixed it. But if you haven't acknowledged it, I have seen it, then your manager will get paged, so on and so forth. So yeah, whenever this gets fixed, just try to create a few destinations. You can create simple ones yourself. What I've seen in big companies is the only destination here is PagerDuty, and then on PagerDuty, which is another service, is where you connect your phone numbers and put out alerts, your emails, give your actual people have these pager devices, and PagerDuty, as the name suggests, the company does handles all of this. So that's a brief of number one, creating a dashboard. Number two, we just set up a alert on it. If it goes above 50%, throw an error. Fairly simple stuff. If you try this yourself, if you go to Datadog and try the same thing, they also have an agent. You run a single command, you see all of this. I would assume they create dashboards for you as well, and you can customize and create your own. This is actually fairly simple stuff, because you're just pressing a bunch of buttons. It gets a little tricky when you start logging. But do we now already understand this? Are we good to go, guys? Can we proceed to the next section? It's 10:54, so we can also take a break. But I would assume it's fairly simple, so we have enough energy to proceed. Alrighty. So let's proceed. We're done with alerts, and as I said, just create one, and then there you go. You'll see an email like, why did I? It's already in the slides. You will receive an email like this. You can acknowledge it, and you're good to go. Next, I want to talk a little bit about NRQL, not too much. This is, as I said, the New Relic has its own query language, which is very much like SQL. That lets you query data and create these charts. As I said, these charts are actually some data in some database. If you want to look at the complete data, you can also, change the query a bit and make it not time series, but, not a chart, but actual, JSON data, for example. If you want to, as you can see, select, let's say, CPU percentage from system sample, which probably is a table that they have, where entity GUID is equal to this. If I run this, I get all the data in JSON. This timestamp, this was the CPU percentage used. Usually you don't want to see this. You want to see a very long graph, but a lot of times you want to see numbers as well. Okay, this is the current CPU usage, 70%. So, you can change this query to get back not just charts, but the actual underlying data that led to that chart. For example, here, this is the CPU percentages that they've stored in their database. Here at this timestamp it was this much, at this timestamp it was this much, so on and so forth. Cool. This language lets you query it, and you can decide how to show it finally, be it a chart, be it JSON line, like a bunch of types of charts that you can create. You don't have to learn this. No one knows this, even in very big companies. When the time comes, you Google and figure out, and somehow are able to create the final thing that you need. You can understand the primitives, of course. Select something as something from this thing, where this thing, which is like very similar to SQL, but you don't have to write all of these complicated queries yourself. You can Google your way around and quickly create. Okay, what is the best way to, or how do you find CPU percent? How would you know? Okay, the field that you have to search for is CPU percent and not CPU usage, for example. The answer is number one, it does give you autocomplete, as you can see. So as you're writing, it'll hint you in the direction of what you want, but you can always just Google and write this. Let's look at a few simple use cases and the queries for them. But as I said, you don't have to ever learn this. Just Google your way around if you have a very weird use case of a chart to create. Select average of CPU percentage from sample time where entity is equal to something. This is the first thing that we already saw. Time series means give me a chart from it. Auto means the time can be automatic. If I replace auto with 1 hour ago, then it will always give me the stats for that 1 hour. But if I write auto, then whoever is the user that is seeing this chart can change this, time to the last 5 minutes, to the last 60 minutes, and then, they will see stats based on that. That is what auto means. Next up, filter by high CPU usage. Let's say you want to see the average CPU percentage where this thing is this thing and CPU percentage is greater than 2. If it ever went below 2, I don't even want to see it. I only want to see the spikes where CPU percentage was more than 2. Very weird use case. You would never see this. But what have we learned? You can add AND conditions and query on multiple fields. I want the stats only for machines that are above 50% or something like that. Multiple graphs in the same timeline. As I said, you can see not just one, but like 5 lines. If I go back to the original hosts that we had, entities, host, you will see there was a graph here that was probably for incoming and outgoing network traffic right here. If you look at this, if you expand it first, there's actually 2 charts here. You don't see the other one because it's so small. But if you look at the bottom here, if I increase the size a bit, it says transmit bytes per second, receive bytes per second. If I click on this one, you will see just the transmit bytes. They are so low, okay, they look very small in front of the green ones, which is very high, which is the amount of bytes it's receiving. Most probably because some bot is, whenever you start an EC2 machine, there is some bot out there that's botting you. That's most probably what this was. And you can, there are 2 charts here, even though you can only see one. That is exactly what the slide shows as well. How can you do this? How can you put 2 charts? Select average of, let's say, the bytes that are going out as transmit bytes per second, outgoing bytes per second, comma, average of the other thing as receive bytes per second from whatever, where, whatever. So as long as you separate them via comma, you can put multiple lines slash charts over here. Usually you have like 3 and 4. You don't have hundreds of lines. You won't be able to make out anything if you do that. But 3, 4, 5 lines you can filter out. For example, I did here. You get the idea. You can filter out. I only want to see the receive bandwidth. You can filter out. I only want to see the outgoing bandwidth. Alrighty. Facet is another important one. As we have more and more machines, right? You might want to see stats of all the machines together. What is the CPU percentage of the 5 instances that I have? I want to see 5 lines over here that show me all the 5 of my servers. For that, you can do something like this: select average CPU percentage from system time, where entity GUID is in this thing and this thing. Facet means based on the entity GUID, create separate lines. What was entity GUID? Every host has its own ID. That ID is called entity GUID. If I have 2 hosts, then if I run this command, I will, for example, I did do this before the class. I created 2 different machines. 1 second, guys. I created 2 different machines and I ran this query. I saw the first one. I saw the second one here as well. The second one had just started, which is why there's not a lot of data for it before it, but you get the idea. Facet over here means that based on the entity GUID, create different IDs. So create different lines. So if there are 5 unique entity GUIDs, there'll be 5 unique lines over here. Hoping that's straightforward as well. Do we understand this part? Do we understand NRQL a little bit? We can't write it ourselves. As I said, you don't have to ever. But the construct, it gives you to be able to create these charts. Either my machine is a little slow or Zoom is today. Or only 9 people voted. Oh, there you go. Much better. 78%. Let me see what's up here. Let me open chat. Any specific question, guys? All right, a bunch of questions here. How to monitor using New Relic if there are hundreds of VMs? That's a great question. Number 1, you can create an average CPU percentage. Number 2, you can still have, as you saw here, different hosts with a single alert on each one of them. So if one does spike up, you can catch it. Usually if you have hundreds of machines, you usually have them on Kubernetes, some auto scaling policy, hopefully Kubernetes. And this has its own set of, as long as you have Kubernetes running and the agent running, it'll give you everything you need, which in this case might be, what if there are a lot of machines running and one of them is spiking up? Entity globally unique identifier. Entity GUID is the globally unique identifier. That is correct. If we have an app on multiple cloud providers, do we use the same command to install? That is correct. As long as it's a Linux machine, then yes. But if it's a Windows machine you have in the other cloud, then of course the command would be different. I made a similar project that exactly. So you basically created the whole thing yourself, which gives you the disk system image size, so on and so forth. You created New Relic yourself, or more specifically in this case, Grafana. Bhaiya, can you share your screen again already? Let's take a mini break until 8:10. Let me answer some questions and then we can go from there. So small break until 8:10, guys. Can New Relic be provisioned by Terraform? Surprisingly, yes. I learned this today. You can provision New Relic via Terraform as well. I never did it in any of my companies, but where did I see it today? Somewhere here when I was setting it up, I saw, do you want to export the Terraform form file for it? So the answer is yes. How to do it is a good question, which I don't know the answer for, because somewhere when I was creating this today, I did see Terraform, and it letting me know, okay, you can actually deploy this via IAC. Let's see. Terraform for New Relic. Get started with New Relic and Terraform. I think your answer might be right here. Terraform is a public. This guide is set up how to set up New Relic alerts with Terraform. So yes, you can. Let me also paste this in chat. Alrighty, let me do a quick recap. Is what a few people asked for. Then we'll go from there. Back to slide 1. Quick recap is we want to learn about logging, monitoring, alerts, status pages. Fairly boring stuff. Something that DevOps folks have to just do once, and isn't iterated on too much until you move from New Relic to a different service provider, because New Relic became very expensive. But something you have to bootstrap only once for your application. You can do it using some paid services. You can do it in-house as well, which means you pay for where you deploy it. You don't really pay for a service provider, because the margins here are really high. If you self-host, then you'll probably save 90-95% of the cost. New Relic is one such service that we are discussing. It lets you do logging, monitoring, and alerting. We've only seen monitoring and alerting right now. Logging is something we have to discuss next. What is monitoring? It basically is that you run a single command on your machine. You run a script that starts the New Relic agent. Once the agent starts is when you can start to create graphs like these and attach alerting policies on top of them. We did a small experiment. We saw the CPU spike up when we ran an infinite loop right here. In fact, when I ran this before the class, I ran it on the main server that runs app.100xdeps.com, project100xdeps.com. And there, as you can see, the next server, this is app.100xdeps.com. That specific next application was eating up around 22% of the CPU. And the Node.js infinite loop that I started was eating up 99%. Harkirat, if it was eating up 99%, how will this get anything extra? This is so close to 100%. The answer is this is 99% of one core. This was an 8-core machine. So 99% here doesn't mean it has 100% of all cores, just one. Dashboards. Next up, we discussed how to create a dashboard given you have all of the data. This was fairly simple. You could just right click on any popularly available chart to you and just add it to your dashboard, or you can write the query for it. How do you write the query for it? You use this language called NRQL, which you rarely need to understand. It's very similar to SQL, and you can write things like these. Select average of CPU percentage from. Now the question really is at this point, how do I know I have to get it from system sample? Where have they written that? And the answer is you find your way around here. Okay, where do they store the CPU percentages or bandwidth in and out? View query, and let's say the answer here was, let me go to, the answer here was network sample. This is where they put all of your network information. I can just look at this whole network sample as well. I can do a select star from network sample, and that'll give me everything that they store in that database. These charts are eventually created out of databases, and you can always look at what data is stored there. For example, when I did a select star from network sample, where entity GUID is this, it is showing me that the agent infrastructure was running this version on this AWS account ID in this AWS availability zone in this region, so on and so forth, which had just a single core on the machine. AMI information it has, this is the image that it was running. And along with all of these things, it also stored, of course, the incoming and out, receive bytes per second for that specific timestamp. And then, somewhere here it will have send bytes per second. So it gives you all the data here if you want to ever figure out, okay, how do I query on, let's say, the network bandwidth in and network bandwidth out, things like these. If I remove this where clause over here, it will give me the same thing for all the machines that I have. I right now only have a single machine, so it won't change anything. But if I had multiple machines, I can simply run select star from network sample. It's stored somewhere. It's effectively them maintaining an SQL database for you that you can query. But more than that, they maintain time series points for you basically, so that it's very easy for you to see charts. That's a brief of NRQL and how you write it. Next up, we're going to get into application performance monitoring. I think that's what APM stands for. Some of you might have heard of it. I always forget the full form. APM now lets you monitor applications. What does APM stand for? Application performance monitoring. Right now we're monitoring what? We are monitoring a full host. We're not monitoring a single process or a application on that host. What if I want to know how much CPU percentage is this application running? How much time does it take for a request to get handled by my Express server? Things like these. So as I said, there are a bunch of things that you can monitor on. There are a bunch of entities that you can create. Hosts is one such entity. The other such entity is services. Next up, we'll understand how can you monitor a service. Specifically, the service we are monitoring is a Node.js process, but you can monitor Golang processes, Rust processes, doesn't matter. Have to write some code to, let the process know you're going to send data to New Relic, and then, New Relic takes over. It's basically not too difficult to do this as well. Let's get into APM next. There is just 5 more slides to go. And then, opening it up to questions, I think we should be able to finish by 8:30, 35ish. New Relic also lets you see the logs from your process. In fact, in the morning when I was running this same thing on my main machine, the machine that hosts projects.100xdevs.com, I saw a bunch of logs. It was automatically tracking all the logs that were being stored in /var/log/nginx/access/log, access.log. So even if you create a machine, if it has nginx running, it will automatically start to capture logs. We don't want that. These are also global logs. If you look at it, it says /API/course/video progress. This is our most used endpoint, because whenever someone is on a video here, and watching that video, they keep sending, I'm currently on second number 5. I'm currently on second number 10. This timestamp gets stored somewhere every 10 seconds. And hence this is the most used endpoint. You can also see that over here. Given I have all of these logs somewhere here, I can actually count here how many people are hitting this video progress endpoint. Is this the one that's taking my CPU percentage to be really high? Can I decrease the amount of times people send this request? So you can do global logging as well. In fact, it does it automatically for you and starts to store all the logs from here. But what do we want to do? We want to do process-based logging. We want here हमारी जो process है, our Node.js process, how can we get the logs from there and put it somewhere else? Why is this good? This is good because if you put your logs somewhere else, you can look at them in a dashboard like this and search on them and create filters and create charts on top of them, rather than figuring out what the problem is by going into your machine and doing a PM to logs. So that's why you want to store remote logs. There are a bunch of companies that only do this. They don't do monitoring at all. They just do logging. Okay, bhai, we will collect your logs and parse them, because logging in itself is a very big sort of problem to solve other than monitoring. Logstash is one such company, which apparently is owned by Elastic, it seems, which lets you do just logging, and New Relic lets you do the same thing. Let's understand how you do that. Again, we have to create a new data source. We are now creating a new data source, but it's not going to be a host this time. What is it going to be? It is going to be a Node.js process. Application monitoring. We want to monitor an application, not a host. And we want to monitor a Node.js application. If I click on Node.js here, it gives me 5 ways to install it. If you want your logs and your, incoming bandwidth on the process, request handling time per second, things like these. If you want all of this in New Relic, there are 5 ways you can bootstrap it. This is the most lucrative one if you're already using PM2 process manager. If you remember, if this is something we introduced when we were deploying to EC2, this is something that I use on the machine as well. And most machines that I have, if you remember, most machines that I have do run PM2, which is a process manager. I keep doing PM2 logs from time to time to see the logs, and you can simply follow a few steps here and it will automatically send all of your logs there. That is one way to do it. Or you can use, if your application does use Docker, if you have a containerized application, then you can follow the steps here and add a few things to your Docker file. You're good to go. Bunch of other ways. We are going to directly do it on the host, since our Express application is directly running on the host. The application that we'll be writing, we'll be doing the same thing here. We'll select the first option here basically. You can create a new key, use an existing key. I don't remember my existing key, and hence I will create a new key, copy it. And then it shows me the steps. Okay, if you have an Express application already, please follow these steps to, add application monitoring in there. What are the steps? First, install New Relic, npm install New Relic. Then replace whatever is your final run command. If it is node index.js, then replace it with New Relic app name, give it an app name, which we'll be writing over here. Let's say node-app, New Relic license key, which was the license key we created in the last section, and then node-r New Relic, and then index.js. Don't simply run node index.js. This should be the final thing that you run. And this is enough for you to send logs over to New Relic. You also have to require New Relic at the top of your file. You unfortunately have to write require New Relic even if it is a TypeScript file. Even if it is a TypeScript file, you have to use require and put this at the top of your index.ts, your entry file, and that's it, you're good to go. Let's quickly create an Express application, follow all of these steps there and see what it looks like on the dashboard. That's what slide number 8 here has as well. Create a fresh application. I am creating it directly on my EC2 machine. You can create it locally in Visual Studio Code and push it to GitHub and pull it. But just for sake of time here, I will directly put it on the EC2 machine that I have, and you can do the same if you know Vim. If you don't know Vim, it might be a little bit harder. Let me open them side by side. Let me create a new project here called test, or new folder here called test, npm init-y to initialize the project. Let's write it in JavaScript to keep it very simple. Npm install New Relic and Express. The only difference in TypeScript would be, there would be no difference basically. I would think it would just work. I haven't tried, but I'm pretty sure it would just work because that's what I did every time I use this. The only funny thing I saw there was, irrespective of you're using TypeScript, you have to use this require syntax at the top of your file. A lot of times you also write code that looks like this. Okay, if process.env.environment equal to prod, only if you're in the production environment should you require New Relic, something like this. So you make sure you only require New Relic in prod. You don't need it in dev. You don't want your developers logs to reach New Relic, right? Your developers also won't have access to this key right here. So you just run this on your main EC2 machine. You never run this during local setup / when you're locally running the thing. Let me copy this thing. Let me paste it here after this finishes, after I've installed New Relic and Express. Taking a long time for me. There you go. Let me create an index.js file inside which I'm writing some very basic React code for, Node.js Express code for now. Written this many times. I hope this is self-explanatory, other than the fact that I had to require New Relic at the top of the file. Let me paste this. Let me exit out. And then now if I run node index.js, it gives me a bunch of errors. It says New Relic for Node.js wasn't able to bootstrap because of this specific error. What is the error? Okay, the app name was not given as an environment variable. That is exactly the thing we need to replace the start script with. We want to run the whole thing. We want this to run. Let me copy this. We want the whole thing to run. A lot of you can see my key right now, which is fine. I will delete it. But I have to run the whole thing, and hence I can either press enter right now. I also have to replace this with index.js, of course. I can press enter right now, or I can create a script in package.json called start, let's say, where I can paste this. So that all I have to do is run npm run start. If I run npm run, oh, it's the wrong one I copied. npm run start, what do I see? I don't see any errors. I just see the application fall off. Why? because this needs to be index.js. And now if I run npm run start, I don't see any errors anymore. I see it says listening on port 3000, which hopefully means my thing should be up. If I go to the next step right here, if I click on continue and say test connection, hopefully it is able to discover my application that is running and able to give me application performance metrics. What are we doing? APM, application performance monitoring, this thing right here. And how are we doing it? We're creating a fresh application specifically. You can do it for logging or what we did as well. You are creating a new data source specifically for a Node.js application. Then you're following the steps that they showed you, which was number 1, install New Relic. Number 2, make sure you require New Relic at the top of the file. Number 3, whenever npm run start runs, you replace it with this whole very long script. Rather than simply running node index.js, you have to run, okay, this is my name of the application, this is my access secret license key, and then node-r New Relic index.js. If I wait now here, it says successful. It is successfully installed. If I click on see your data, it will again show you a bunch of standard things that you want to see in a Node.js process. For example, web transactions time. How much time does it take for a single request to get handled? Harkirat, how does it know? How does it know that a request is coming, a request is going? It is listening on, it understands that this is an HTTP server. There are incoming requests. It is able to parse them and able to figure out what was the difference between request and the response time. What else is it showing you? Throughput, the number of requests that are coming. Right now, this Express server is running in isolation, which is why, of course, there won't be any data here. But you can actually send it some dummy requests. And here you might learn about a new library called load test. If I do in the same server on the left side, what am I doing? On the left side, I am running my backend application with the New Relic. On the right side, I will do npm install -g load test. Load test is a library that lets you, as the name suggests, load test an HTTP server. We have an HTTP server already running here. I can load test it from here itself. Harkirat, can you not do it from Postman? I can, but I have to open my EC2 machines, port, things like these. If I do it from the same machine, then this machine can access itself, which is why it's just easier to do it here. How do you use the load test library? This is the command that you can run. It says load test. I think this means the number of threads that should spawn, or maybe the number of times you have to do it. Probably the number of times that you have to do it. You should Google this flag. We can also do load test --help. -c means concurrency. Number of concurrent requests, which means at a time you should send 10 requests. At a time you should send 10 requests, and the requests per second, I think that's what RPS means, is 200. Again, we can just look at it. And where are we sending it? To http://localhost:3000, which is the same thing that's running here. In fact, you might have seen a bunch of route hits, which means this route was hit. It's still hitting because we're sending a bunch of requests there. Question is, what do we see on the dashboard when a bunch of requests come? Is it able to show me my throughput? How many requests I'm able to handle? Is it able to show me the time that it took for every request to get handled? The answer is yes, it will. I mean, it'll have come here in a while, but you get the idea that we'll see this populate very soon. Until we do, let's see what's up next. The next thing is logging. So let's wait for this to happen. Let's wait for the dashboard to get populated. But along with all these charts, you will see a section here called logs. If I click on logs, it says get log management setup. Add log data. Just logging on a host. So create a new key. Start recording. What I was saying was, let's first look at APM and services. This is where you'll find all of your services. The one that we created was this Node app. And let's see if these get populated. They sort of do, as you can see, 2.73 requests happen in some chunk. This is not per second. This is basically, between this time and this time, which probably is a minute worth of an interval. these many requests came out. I sent a total of, I think, 4,000 requests. If you saw here, the request was 10 into 200, which is 2,000 requests, which means I sent a total of 4,000 requests. In this time interval, the first 2.73K or 3,000 requests went out, and the next one probably 1.5K. And if you look at it here, this is the average time it took in this specific interval for a request to get handled by the server. Since it's a very simple request, it took less than 1.1 milliseconds, which sounds right. The question is logs. How do you make logs appear here in this application? Firstly, do we understand this much? Can we move on to logging? We'll understand something new when we reach logging, something called the Winston logger. But can we proceed to logging, guys? Are we good to go? Do we understand APM? Thankfully, there's not too much after this. So happy to recap as well. Sort of understand. Okay, great. Last thing is logging. Wouldn't it be nice? This was a Node.js process that I had started. Why are these logs not automatically reaching, this section? Seems like this is my APM and services, which means all the services that I have, all the applications that I have. This is the Node app that I have. At the top of this Node application, I had written require New Relic. Why is it not sending my logs? Why is it not showing me something like this? These are all your logs. Hi there. And why can I not search for it? Why does it say you need to set it up? And the answer is, by default, when you do a console.log, which I have done here. If you look at vindex.js, I put a console.log here called route hit. This does not reach New Relic. New Relic has a slightly, not a weird way. It just expects you to do logging a certain way. They have a nice blog post that you can read through. Let's see if I've put it here in the slides. There you go. Configure logs context Node.js. Node.js agent logs in context. With our Node.js APM agent, you can get APM logs in context, which lets you see the app logs in the context of other New Relic data. Automatic logs in context applications. With application logging, your APM agent automatically collects and contextualizes your logs. If you're using the supported framework, then there's nothing else you have to do. If you're using one of these 3 frameworks for logging, then New Relic will automatically be able to grab all of your logs. Harkirat, what are these frameworks? These are general Node.js framework. Until now, we've only done this console.log. But if you're from the Java world, you might have remembered that we create a logger a lot of times and create our own logger class. And that is true here as well. There are a bunch of libraries that let you do better logging. What does better logging mean, Harkirat? Number one, this is what their code looks like. Okay, rather than doing console.log everywhere, you do something like, logger.warn, logger.log, give it a level. Okay, this is info. This is not an error. This is just information I want to log. And this is the final message that I want to log. Things like these. Harkirat, what is the benefit of doing this? Benefit is it's just much cleaner logging. And more than that, it lets you put logs in multiple places. A library like Winston will let you put a log not just in your console, but also on New Relic. Also on, if you want, a Postgres table. It doesn't matter. There are a bunch of data sinks that you can decide, which are called transports in Winston, where you can put these logs, New Relic being one of them. So that is a reason you might want to use a logging library like Winston. If you want to put your logs over to New Relic, unless you go down a PM2 route and figure out another way to move standard out over to New Relic, you can use something like Winston. If you use Winston, then you don't even have to log anything here. Your machine never fills up. You never have machine logs. All of your logs directly go to New Relic, and you don't have the console ever as a sink, which makes sure your machine never fills up with application logs. So what do we have to do next? We have to replace all of our logging with this library called Winston, which is something you use even if you're not using New Relic. It isn't like this is a New Relic provided library. This is a general logging library, including these two as well. I've never heard of their names. I've only heard of Winston and used it. And what does it let you do? Lets you do better logging. What does better logging mean? Lets you log like this. I want to log to a file name called error.log. If there is ever an error, it should be logged here. And I also want to log to a file called combined.log. And you can put things like, I also want to log to a Postgres table. All of these transports you can add. That way you have to do a single logger.info, and this route hit reaches all of these destinations, not just your console. That is the reason you might want to use it. And if you use it with require New Relic at the top, most probably this library will inject another transport here called the New Relic transport. So it will add another thing here called new.winston.transports.new relic, or whatever their, it might not exist on winston.transport. It might be their own library. It will just inject it here, and that way your logs start to reach New Relic as well. Let's try to replace our index.js file with this long index.js file and see if it actually happens. What is the only difference? I have initialized a logger. What have I said? Const logger equal to winston.create logger. You don't need this line. In fact, get rid of this line. It might be better. This basically tells you what levels of level you need. Do you need info? Do you need warning? Do you need error? Things like these. And if you put this line, I think there is some restriction. Read about what this flag does, but from what I remember, it won't let you do a console.error anymore. It will only let you do info or below. What is below info? There is warning. Warning is actually above info. How can you log? What are the severity of your logs? It will either be an error, or it will be just a warning, or it will just be some information, or it will just be a log. So, usually you do one of four things. You do a console.error. Okay, by this though is super severe. My monitoring system should know if this comes, and if there is a spike in console.errors, there is a problem. Warning is something you can sort of ignore. It's still bad, but we're just warning. Info is, this is just for my information, or just good to have, but doesn't affect the system at all. Log is usually just for, local debugging. This is a log for the developer. So these are the 4 levels usually: error, warning. There's also one called debug, which probably doesn't lie, anywhere in this hierarchy, which is just for, debugging purposes. So the very first flag that you saw here, level info, basically says, if I remember correctly, okay, info and logging would be allowed. Warn and error would not be allowed, which is why you don't really need to put this specific level. Harkiyat, why does it do that? To put restrictions. As I said, this is a very customizable logger. So, it gives you a bunch of things that you can pick and choose whether you want to use or not. The other thing it gives you is formatters. Okay, how do you want to format the final thing? Do you want, if the user does a logger.info route hit, do you want a string to be stored, or do you want it to be formatted to JSON? What is the benefit of formatting it to JSON? It becomes searchable on New Relic. On New Relic, when you finally see the log, if it's a JSON log, you can search x.message equal to route hit, things like these. So it lets you format it a certain way. You can add another formatter here for adding a timestamp. What does adding a timestamp mean? It means along with the log, the timestamp would be there. This log happened at this specific time. Bunch of other things. The important things are the transports and to format it before it reaches New Relic. Then the other sort of thing here is you don't need to log anything to the console if you're running it in production. If you're running it in production, if you're running it on an EC2 machine, then the logs would just fill up the machines. It is good to see them on a local machine, but you don't really need them if you're running it in production, and hence only add the console transport. What does the console transport mean? Put it to a file, put it to a file, put it to a console. That's the third one. Only do it on dev, don't do it in production. And lastly, the application remains the same. Rather than doing console.log, we do a logger.info. That's all that you have to do. Everywhere throughout your application, create a separate file called logger.ts, export this logger from there, import it in other places, and use it throughout your application. This is what the final application looks like. The final thing looks like. If you are able to, after we do this, you'll be able to look at all of your logs in a place like this. As you can see, it says 3792 logs. That's the number of requests that I have sent. And I had also written some code. There you go. Here, 50% of the times throw an error as well. Do a logger.error, but every time do a route logger.info route hit. And finally here, as you can see, you can clearly tell us that this was an error. This is red. This was a warning. This is blue. And whenever you create monitoring systems, have there been more than 10,000 errors? You can write queries like these. We'll be writing them very soon. Let me quickly replace the code with this Winston logger and see if we see it on our dashboard, then go from there. What am I going to do? I will remove the index.js from the server. I will re-add it. I will paste the new code here which has the Winston library as well, has the logger, and rather than doing console.log, does a logger.info, and then npm install Winston followed by npm run start. I think one more thing you have to do is turn on a flag. Yes. So by default, logging is disabled. Like if you have logs and if you have Winston, they will not go to New Relic because there are a lot of logs are very noisy basically, and you want to restrict the bandwidth, outgoing bandwidth. It can become really high if you send every log over to New Relic. The amount of logs, depending on how noisy your logs are, which a lot of times is very noisy, you can send a lot of things to New Relic it doesn't need. So by default, it's turned off. You can turn it on. You can also add a bunch of other environment variables to restrict. Only send 1,000 messages in 1 minute, not more than that. Ignore the rest of them. Why do you do this? Because number one, your New Relic pricing will go up by a lot if every log reaches there. Or number two, your bandwidth for the machine is also, it'll start to get choked if every log is reaching New Relic. So that's the fourth flag that you have to add. This by default will send everything, but you should put some sort of limits if you have extremely noisy logs to make sure you're not sending everything. Let me open package.json and add the third environment variable as well, which is New Relic application logging forwarding enabled equal to true. You actually might not need this, but we will see. npm run start. And now let me send it a bunch of requests. Look at the logs. They look much different now. They're structured in some info : route hit something. If I close this, I will see a combined.log file is created. An error.log file is created, which means we have changed how logging is happening. We're not doing console.log anymore. They're being written not just to the console, but also, to two files. Harkirat, you had written the code, this code right here. If this is not production, only then should you put it on the console. Yes, but I did not inject this environment variable. I did not do node env equal to production, which is why I still see it in the console. If I add a fourth environment variable to package.json, if I do this, then I probably won't see it. Let's see, vpackage.json equal to production. And if I do npm run start now and send a request, I don't see the logs anymore because we're running in production, which means this line of code never ran. Cool. Now coming to the moment of truth. Do we see the logs here finally? If I refresh now, and go to logs. Oh, I do see logs. Nice. Route hit, there was an error, so on and so forth. What's the best part? You can query on top of them. You can create an alert. If the number of errors is really high in 5 minutes, in a 5-minute window, if it's more than 2,000 errors, then create an alert. How do you do that? Should be a way here to create a dashboard. Add to a dashboard. Logs. You can also just put the logs in a dashboard. But let me also show you how to create a chart on top of the count of errors, let's say. As you can see, I can now see all the logs here. You don't only store charts, you also store like textual data from time to time. This is a little vague of a thing. You probably don't need logs here. What you need is a chart that shows you the number of errors that have happened, let's say in the last 5-minute window. Let's see how to do that. There you go. Select count of message from log. Log is the table. How did I arrive at this before the class? I totally forgot. Somewhere here in the APM and services, in the logs, I saw a way to create a chart, which I totally forgot now. Let me see if I can find it. Either way, we'll create open in logs, add to dashboard export. There you go. NRQL. If I clicked over here, it showed me this. Okay, this is the query that gives you this in a tabular format. And what do I want? I want count of messages. Everything else is the same. And I want time series auto. So that is how I arrived from all the logs to the number of messages. Now, what else do I want? I only want the error messages. I don't really care about the messages that are warnings. I don't want to alert on top of them. So another check I will add amongst the where A equal to this thing or B equal to this thing or so on and so forth can be and something equal to error. What is that something? I will have to find again in the logs or in the slides, but it's very easy to find here as well. Let me just copy from slides for now. Level equal to error. Where did I find this? I found this in the log. If you go here, if you click on any one of these logs, it will pretty much show you everything. And as you can see, level is info for the blue ones. Level is error here. So what do you search for? And level equal to error. If I now run it, it'll show me just the errors that happened in the last whatever this window length is. And now I can put alerts on top of this. Now that I have this query, I can create my own chart in this dashboard, which will have not just the logs in the tabular format. Okay, this is how you expand. I think, how do you add a chart? Add a widget, add a chart. Paste the query that I had just written. Run it, and I see the same thing here. If I click on save, I now have not just the metrics of my machine, but also the metrics of my process, specifically the latest set of logs that came here and the amount of errors that are coming on this server. Here I can also put up an alert, create an alert condition. If the number of errors on the machine is more than XYZ, then send out a warning. Fairly common alert you put out. What else? Let's see. Let me quickly see if there's anything more. Okay, we need to discuss this as well. All right. One last thing we have to discuss, guys, then we'll call it, which is P55 and P99. Let me quickly do it, then I'll open it for questions. This is important, especially if you're giving a system designs interview. Let me quickly recap what I did just now. By the end of what I did, which you can try yourself, Google and try to, start a Node.js process. By the end, try to create something like this. A dashboard where you see machine stats, the CPU usage on the machine, the storage on the machine, as well as process stats, the logs of the specific process, the number of errors that are coming. Maybe add another dashboard here for the request time, the response time. If you remember, there is another default chart that we got right here. The chart was web transaction time. How much time is it taking for a request to be handled? Maybe add this chart there. But notice this chart has a bunch of variations, specifically the last one. The first one is probably the average time it takes for a request to be handled. Second one is the cumulative time it takes for the request to be handled. The third one, what is this? It says duration P95, duration 99, median, average. It gives you 4 things. It says this is the average time it took for a request to be handled, 2.36 milliseconds here. And there was a problem after this. I stopped the process, which is why this is red. But this is the average, this is the median. But there are 2 other things here, duration 99 and duration 95. Let's discuss these 2. These are important metrics that you follow when you have time series data. When you're measuring things like response times, CPU usages, things like these, which one should you use? Basically, the question is this. What were we measuring here? The response time. How much time does it take for a web transaction to happen? How much time does it take for a request to get handled by Express? Should we use the median, the mean, the average, or should we use something else? What did these guys use? They gave us the median also. Okay, this is the median, the orange line, 1.2 milliseconds and 1.7 milliseconds. They gave us the average as well, but they gave us 2 other things, something else. What is this something else? Why do you need it? Let's say the data was this small. Okay, this is the time that it took for a request to be handled. Most requests got handled in a decentish time, 13 milliseconds, 11 milliseconds, 1 millisecond. This is sorted. But the last 2, 50 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds. Let's say someone is from Nigeria or some very bad internet country. For them, it took a very long time for the request to be handled. The average here is 14.45 though. Why? Because this guy pulled the average up. Average should ideally be 4, maybe 5. That's a better number, because one person having a bad internet does not mean your whole application is, bad, or your response times are bad. And hence, average is not the best metric. Similar problem remains in median as well. Maybe not exactly this. Median is basically the middle of the pack. Sort the whole thing and find the middlemost number, which in this case, since there are two middlemost numbers, we find their average 9 and 10 and get 9.5 as the average. But a better metric other than averages and median, and what's the problem with averages and median? They don't give you, a single person can break your alerts. If you have an alert set on your average is at 14.5, if a request is taking more than 14 seconds, we should call an engineer. Then a single person with a bad internet can make, your on-call engineer wake up, even though they shouldn't. As long as 99% of your customers are fine, you should be fine. So can you guess what P99 means? It means, or P90 means, let's say, it means how well are the top 90% doing. What is the worst time of the top 90% of the people? Amongst these 20 people, how well are the top 18 people doing? And the answer is they're doing pretty well. 13 is the P90 time here. That is the time that you aim for usually. As long as 90% of the people are fine, you're fine. The number usually is 99 or 99.9. But you ignore the rest of them, especially if they're highly anomalous and extremely high for a bunch of reasons. This person had bad internet. There was some random spike that happened for a second that, added a single entry that's a million milliseconds, let's say, for some random reason. You want to ignore that. You want to focus on your 90% or 99% of customers. That is what P90 means. What does P90 mean? Top 90 percentile basically. What's the worst of the top 90 percentile? And the answer here is 13. Can you guess what is P95 over here? If P99 is 13, P95 is 50. If you take the top 95% of values here, which is the first 19 values, 50 is the worst time that you saw. So your P95 is 50. That is the metric that you usually create alerts on top of. As long as, what did it say here? Duration 99%. As long as the top 99 percentile is, let's say, below 9 milliseconds, it's fine. If the last 1% is pulling it up by too much, we will ignore that and we'll just focus on the 99%. So what is a common metric? This is also a very popular system design interview question that was asked to me, and I failed, I flunked, and as soon as he said P99, it hit me. Yeah, this was what he's talking about. How does the question go usually? What would happen if you have an anomaly? If a single user comes who does XYZ, then to your whole monitoring will be messed up, your average will be messed up. So is there a better metric you can use other than averages? And the answer is not median, but P99, P95, top 99 percentile or top 95 percentile. That's all I had to show. And that's pretty much it. If I'm being honest, there are more things here, which infrastructure tab is just, another tab. There are a bunch of tabs here. As we add Kubernetes in the future and, monitor our Kubernetes system, this will become alive and you'll see a bunch of charts here. There is an infrastructure section, if there is one here, that will pretty much give you an overview of your infrastructure. As you add more and more hosts, more and more application, you'll see their CPU usage in a single graph right here. Somebody asked, how can you create alerts if you have 100 machines? Whatever this query is, will give you, if there are 100 instances, you'll see 100 lines here. So you can create averages. You can get the query from here basically, and create whatever alert you want. Could be if more than 5 machines are above 50% CPU usage, you create an alert, something like that. That's what the infrastructure tab is. Other than that, I just wanted to show how can you create status pages. Something similar to what I showed you a while back, which was status.100xtabs.com. This is much simpler than New Relic. I'm sure there might be a way New Relic, I'm not sure, but New Relic might also give you a way to do this. But there's this website called Better Uptime, which is very similar to PagerDuty. It lets you do notifications very well. It lets you add on-call challenge people to your calendar, on-calls, manager, CTO, and upscale as high you want to go as people don't pick up the call. So we can discuss this tomorrow if need be, but it's fairly straightforward though. If you go to Better Uptime or just look at a tutorial, you'll see how easy it is to create a status page. Let me quickly do that. If I go to, I think here I'm already logged in. Yes. So after you log into Better Uptime, you will see a dashboard like this. You can create monitors to begin with. For example, I have two monitors, projects.100xdevs.com, app.100xdevs.com. What does monitors mean? I am monitoring them, and as you can see, they're both green. It says up over here. That's the first thing you have to do. Add all of your services there. Then there's an option to create a status page. If you click on create status page and add your details here, what should the logo be? What is the get in touch URL? A lot of people will come to your status page and see, yeah, your website is down. I want to ask a question, a URL where they can go, what kind of a theme you want, so on and so forth. After you finish all of this, it'll give you a website that you can connect to your own domain and create a page similar to status.100xdevs.com that as you can see, reds here mean the website was down, greens here means they were up, and even these guys let you send calls. As you can see, it says who's on call here. You have to upgrade for it, create a team, pay some money. If you have 5 engineers, then you can create a proper on-call schedule and do everything that PagerDuty lets you do, and call people, notify people, email people, so on and so forth. So that's how you can create a status page. There are a bunch of open source free ones as well, so you don't necessarily have to pay money to these guys. All of these is something we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay, the problem with all of these services is they're very expensive. They get very expensive very quickly. And you also become highly dependent on them, which means it's very hard to move away from them, very hard to change providers. So you keep bearing that expense for a long time. That's why this is a big business. That's why New Relic and Datadog are doing so well. So the solution here is there are a bunch of open source tools. Grafana plus Prometheus stack is the most popular one. You'll hear this many times if you are a DevOps guy or you are in a company that's doing monitoring in-house. The most common tool to do monitoring in-house, by in-house I mean using open source tools, is Grafana plus Prometheus. And then if you want to do logging on top, the Grafana folks have written something called Loki. This is like the most common stack to do almost everything we saw today on New Relic, if you want to do it yourself in-house and self-host. That's a brief for today. That's all I have for today. Last things we rushed through. Do we understand this? This is important. Everything else is straightforward. But do we understand P5599? This is super important. Okay, like very important question also. And otherwise, okay, so 80%, 77% in fact, not great. But the good thing is the class is over, 77%. Thank you for coming, and try this. Try doing Grafana yourself. You learn a lot when you do yourself. Yeah, you know the drill. So try to create your own thing today. Bring up a machine, put something there. Experiment with New Relic. New Relic is actually very big. It has a lot of things. When I used New Relic on my main machine, it showed me automatically a bunch of containers I had. So I remembered I had a existing container running there for a few days ago or a few months ago when I was explaining it in a class. So it gives you, that's what it gives you, right? Observability. When I opened entities, I saw along with my host, I saw a container over here that was automatically detected by it. So that's exactly the goal of these tools, which is observability, which means being able to observe your infrastructure. That's all, guys. So all I had for today. Let me open chat and we'll go from there. Chat is open. Let me start from the top. P95 again. What is one way to find, what is the average response time? You might say, Harkit, average. Let's take the mean. Let's take all of these numbers. If this is the first user, it took 1 second for the request to be handled. Second user, it took 2 seconds, so on and so forth. What is a good way to check कि average क्या होगी? What is the average? You can either take a mean, add all of the numbers, divide them by 20. What is the problem there? A single user, you can't see this, but it's 100 at the very end. A single anomaly was able to increase the average by so much. That's a problem. And hence, you say P95. What is the worst of the first 95 people here? And what is the answer? It is 50. So as long as P95 means what is the worst of the top 95% of the people, I don't care about the rest 5%. Even if they are bad, even if they're a million, I will not include them in my calculations because a single user can actually skew your metric by a lot. If let's say, that user is in a very big internet and it took them a million milliseconds, then your average will go up by so much. Even though your users aren't being affected, 99% of your users, in case of P95, 95% of your users are not being affected. Only one user is being affected. but that is calling the on-call engineer, and hence the metric that you use to avoid these anomalies is P99, P95. How do you monitor a monitoring system? You will have to ask the folks at New Relic. Seems like they went down today. I don't know. I mean, there are open source tools, as I said. I'm sure they, what do you call it, dog feed a lot of this, which means, they of course use New Relic themselves, and you can do that, right? You can go to New Relic here and add your own instances, so you can do that. It's not an unsolvable problem. It's just funny that you had to ask that, because of course they use their own thing, and New Relic does do monitoring on New Relic. It's a chicken and egg problem. I do get that. How did they do monitoring first? And the answer is they probably did not. And as the product matured, now they use themselves. Just answering some questions related to the class first, and then I'll get to the other questions. Can we add GraphQL offline? There is a video from cohort 1. Akash, take a note. Let's see. You can definitely get the cohort 1 video, but we did not discuss GraphQL in detail. We discussed GraphQL clients and, specifically this thing called Hasura. So we might need if you want GraphQL, then it might be a separate video. In dub.co, if you scroll at the end, we have all systems operational thingy. How can I do that? Is it something like incident.io provides? Yeah, these status pages provide something similar. Smarter incidents from scratch. Let's see, dub.sh. You can probably just click on it. It will take you to what service they're using. All systems operational. If you click on this, it probably takes you to a status page. The question is, what are they using here? Looking at, there you go, incident.io. So yeah, they do use incident.io. That's what you suggested as well, right? Yeah. So just sign up here. It'll be fairly simple. Press 2 buttons, and very similar to better uptime. Give it your endpoints, which in this case might be dub.co, api.dub.co, cdn.dub.co, whatever services they have. And then that'll create a status page. That'll probably give you some, if you go to incident.io, I'm sure they give you some React widget to which you can give, whatever their ID might be. And you render that React widget here. That's how they've done it. Go to their code, go to the footer, you'll see it, right? If you go here, search for footer, or just search for incident.io, I'm sure there's, I was sure incident. There you go, footer. What does footer say? Ongoing status badge, which gets all the statuses from status.dub.co/api/v1/summary. So it hits this endpoint. As long as ongoing_incidents is an empty array, it renders all systems operational. If it is not an empty array, it renders whatever else. There is a problem, there is a bug, whatever. So this is the endpoint that they're hitting. How did we find it? We went to footer.tsx and we saw there is a component called status badge, which does what? It uses use SWR. If you remember, this is a library we've talked about in a while, which it's like Axios, but it gives you hooks as well as lets you poll endpoints again and again. It polls this endpoint. What is this endpoint doing? This is the endpoint that status.incident.io provides you, which gives you the summary of dub.sh website. And then if the number of incidents are 0, it renders that badge. Should I proceed with the Bounty Web3 app that I told you about? Yeah, Sargam has already done it. It might not be a very high. If you want to do something, this also someone did in the Web3 repository, the latest Web3 video. Someone created private keys using Shamirs. So if you can do that, that is probably better. That is the only way we will actually deploy it to production. If you just have a private key on a server, most probably we will not deploy it. Should I? Okay. Will we cover OpenTelemetry tomorrow? Not tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll do Grafana. Open tracing, OpenTelemetry might be something if we do cover, we'll cover much later down the line, or I'll just put it in an offline video. This, at least for tomorrow, the goal is to have some dashboards up for some applications, and learn Grafana, Prometheus just for simple monitoring. We can do OpenTelemetry at some point, but Akash, I can make a note. We have a list of offline videos. I'll just post them on Discord, and based on votes, we'll decide which one to pick up. What if I'm using a microservice architecture and also want my application to run on Kubernetes pods? Also want them to run on Kubernetes pod. Also want them to run it on a bunch of microservices, which let's say are raw applications running. How do I monitor that if my microservice architecture and also my application runs? How do I monitor? I guess your question is, what if you have this? I have a bunch of hosts also, Kirat, which are all running my process microservices. And then I have a very big Kubernetes cluster which is running a bunch of my pods. How do I monitor both of them together? Ka answer is, for your Kubernetes cluster, you just I'm sure there's a Helm chart you can put that will install your New Relic agent on every machine that's out there, and whatever pods are there can, let's say this machine has 3 pods that are running, they can all talk to the New Relic agent that is running, and it can you'll see all of those logs, charts, data. What are these charts in the end? It's effectively a bunch of data in some tables that you query, right? If I click on view query here, what is the query? It is select something from some. There is a metric table that got filled. The same metric table will get filled for a different pod ID. It will get filled for a service ID. So whenever you're writing this query, you can always combine data from multiple services and put them on the same chart, for example, if that's your question. You have all the data. There's a different way to get data from a Kubernetes cluster. There is a different way to let New Relic pull data from a microservice architecture, which let's say is non-containerized system, processes running directly on a system. But in both these cases, once your data reaches here, you just have to understand how to write this query and combine data from both the places. The data is present out there probably in the same table with different entity IDs. One of them has is Kubernetes pod equal to true or something like that. But as long as you have the data, even if it's in different tables, I would assume it will be in the same metrics table, for example. But even if it's in a different table, you can just combine the data and put them together. It's a good question. Good practice for us to do once we are knock Kubernetes out of the park. One good activity to do would be this. One would be to build lead code, things like these. As soon as Kubernetes is done, then we can actually start to pick ambitious projects. But yeah, I'm approaching placements in my college. Can you, okay, let me just go through all of the other ones, then happy to reach here. What if I'm using okay, so that, how to do front-end analytics in existing Next.js application, like how do users click on a specific button, spend time? Yeah, great question. Well, if you look at it, sir, here somewhere, you will find browser. People don't do this too often unless you have a very client-side heavy application, which let's say, for example, you said, number of times a button was clicked. But yes, New Relic lets you track not just backends, not just systems, but also front ends. We did not cover it. Happy to cover it. It should be simple only. You can put a simple script in your Next.js application and it will start to post all the data, which might include, might not include based on, the amount of information you're grabbing from the user, the button clicks. But you can fairly sure there is something here that you can, attach to a button to track the number of times the button was clicked. That seems like the use case that you want. New Relic lets you do front end as well. Datadog as well. Like most of these monitoring systems let you do front end monitoring as well. If there are 95 people using backend, maybe like 5% of the time companies are actually using, front end monitoring as well. Not used as often. Okay. Level info, it specifies the log should not be above that level. Level trace debug info 1. Yeah, exactly. So if you set level to info, what does it do? It specifies that the log should not be above this level. Exactly. So it should be below it, which includes trace, debug, info, warn, error, fatal, which does not include these basically. Anything below it basically just can do console.info or console.log, cannot do console.trace, debug, info. That's right. No, so this is the series, my bad. So the trace, debug, info, read about it. Read about the levels that they have and what this specific flag does, which as you said, specified it should not be above or below. What if okay, so that. In P90 and P95, any other number in top 90% is correct. What is, we have more outliers assuming many people have bad. If many people have bad internet, then your engineer should be woken up. It doesn't happen in the real world. Not 90% of the internet has, or like 10% of the people in the world don't have bad internet. You want to avoid anomalies. If 90% or if 10% of your people are facing problems, then there is a problem. The problem might be everyone in Nigeria suddenly woke up and used your website, but realistically that doesn't happen. The goal with P99 is, we do not care about the worst 1% of the people. But if that number does become 10%, even though it is their fault, you still want the engineer to wake up. You still want this to be reported as a problem. You still want to figure out how can you fix it. And if there is no way you can fix it, if there is a village in highly populous village in Nigeria where people are doing this, then you just ignore that specific section of people from your alerts, because they will unfortunately have bad internet forever. That doesn't happen. Like by average, it does not happen. These will always be anomalies. What you're trying to assume in the real world will never happen. All right. Let me open chat one more time. Okay. Seems like we're out of questions on monitoring. So now I'll answer whatever comes. Vishnu, let's get to your Notion doc. It's been pending from the beginning of the class. When you fork a repository, which branch will you update the upstream changes on? If the CI/CD pipeline main and develop push the code to a upstream change with the develop branch, will I put the upstream change? You will put it in the develop branch. So what I can understand from this is, okay, you have a main branch. Your company with your contributing has a main branch, has a develop branch, and then contributors come. Main, develop, contributor comes. Contributor will merge here. So a bunch of commits will come here. Commit from one contributor, coming from main contributor, commit from some readme update from, some users somewhere. And then all of them together get merged / moved to main whenever a release happens. That's what a release is. This is what, the maintainer will do. Create a change log. These are the changes that we have made. We are making release 16.2, so on and so forth. So you will never have the power / should never merge to main. You should merge to develop. If the company has that, a lot of people don't have it. They only have the master branch, in which case what will you do? But if they have a, develop, then sometimes they have staging. Develop goes to staging, staging goes to main. In that case, you contribute to develop. Are you aware of Sentry monitoring and posts? I am aware of Sentry. It's the easiest one that people use. Fairly straightforward if you want to use Sentry. Similar dashboard. Copy a script, put it in your front end, puts the logs there. Sentry is open source is something I did not know. I thought Sentry is not open source. Sentry is not. Oh no, yes, we are open source. Sentry is open source. I did not know this. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Now I'm confused what to discuss tomorrow. But I mean, we will still go to Prometheus with Grafana. It's much more powerful than Sentry. It has its own ecosystem of plugins, sources, and charts, things like these. But this is a good information for me. Did they recently become it? I don't know. Would have guessed. I would have known they're open source. Never mind. Moving on. Why didn't we cover Next.js? Isn't this good for TypeScript backends with Node.js? Yes, I'm sure there's an easy way. Let's see. How can you add monitoring to a Next.js application, Harkirat? You did not cover it. Okay. Let's go here and let's search for Next. Oh, okay. It's browser, Shopify. This is browser monitoring in Next.js. Let's see. Next.js backend monitoring, New Relic. Sentry. There you go. How to monitor a Next.js application. Maybe they don't have the best systems to monitor Next.js. They do have something, but that, from what I can tell, is only browser monitoring and not backend monitoring. So there's a good chance they don't, and then you do use a different one. Seems like Sentry does have Next.js monitoring, as you can see. So now you use Sentry. So yeah, let's see though if this blog post takes us somewhere. Backend observability. There you go. Install the agent, and then configurations. Yeah, before you do next start, you add a -r at Unix/next. So this is what dev becomes, build becomes, start becomes, view performance in New Relic. There you go. You see the transaction, same thing basically. Whatever we did in Express, very similar. You install New Relic and at New Relic/next, rather than doing next start, you do Node.js options equal to -r at New Relic / next start, and then you're good to go. You see the same metrics in a very similar dashboard over here. This is for backend. For frontend, as you saw, you could just go here. This is from 2012, so this might not be very well maintained, but try it out. I would assume it'll just work. For the front end, you can just search for Next.js and click on the browser here. Oh, sorry, your question was why didn't we cover Nest.js? Isn't it good for writing TypeScript backends with Node.js? This wasn't part of the syllabus. Sorry, completely missed your question. Put it, Akash, put it in the stack. We'll probably have by the end 20-30 extra videos, and we won't have these many. We'll have a list of these many, and then we'll see what are the top ones. We'll pick from there based on votes. Let's see. For a startup with cost wise, which is better, New Relic or some alternative? Open source, in-house. For a startup, it doesn't matter, but because you won't have a lot of users, so it doesn't matter. But from day one, just a better idea to do Grafana. Basically what we'll be discussing tomorrow, just easier and cheaper. Datadog, all of these get very expensive very quickly. Sometimes 100K a month kind of bills, which is something you don't want. Next, some suggestion on features to implement here. Okie dokie. So the class is okie dokie. What can we implement here? CPU disk. Add a bunch of lower level OS things like CPU idle time. There is this OS concept that you might have done in college. I did as well and totally forgot about what's it called. Let's see how many of you know this. I knew the name but totally forgot what it does. Do you know what a load average is? Probably the college people do. This is a good quiz question. Do you know what a load average is? Oh, okay. 80%. Suddenly feel good about myself. So this is basically again an OS specific concept. To answer your question, this might be one good thing to add. This is the number of processes in the last 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes that asked for a CPU. Because you could have an 8-core machine but could have 100 processes who were asking for CPU to be used. So if you've done OS or operating system, then you understand interleaving, understand CPU intensive processes when it gets moved in there. Some deja vu from back in college. But yeah, things like these, load average, CPU idle time, maybe disk usage, better charts. You can do a lot of things. Open source it. But ideally, just create these on top of Grafana, because that's it'll be very hard for you to compete with Grafana. It'll be very easy for you to build a bunch of plugins for the Grafana plus Prometheus ecosystem, and let people use those. So don't go this low level. Assume people have all the constructs in Prometheus, in Grafana, and then build on top of it. All right, let's see. When you answered that one, is there a lot of overhead for hosting an internal monitoring application? No, but yeah, you have to of course worry about hosting it or monitoring the monitoring application. What if your server on which Grafana is running only went down? Then what will you do? So yes, you have to of course worry about monitoring the monitoring system, but still not worth going through something like New Relic in the long run, because costs are incredibly high. Maybe that has changed. These companies learn, and also at scale give a lot of discounts. So basically, if you're just starting out, doesn't matter. Whatever gets you off the ground easy, which in this case would be New Relic. You run a command. That the whole reason their onboarding is so smooth, right? You run the command, it runs there. They want it to be a very sticky thing. You run it and then you're stuck with New Relic forever. So don't overage there and spend time self-hosting it. If you're a startup, you have better things to worry about. Monitoring is your last concern. How do you structure logs such that there is less noise? So you have a lot of console.logs. You have some console.warns. You have very little console.errors, or you throw errors, rarely. That way, even though when you're debugging, you see a bunch of logs, you only put some on to New Relic. You only throw the errors on New Relic. You can set that up somewhere in Winston, only the error logs should reach New Relic, and the rest are for local development. But only what's needed, only what's going to actually trigger an alert, only what needs to be observed needs to go to New Relic. But generally, these logs are good, man. I mean, all your logs, whatever you need for eventually figuring out what went down. For example, you will get a random report ke bhai at 6 a.m. this person was seeing this specific error. How do you debug? Let's say you are on Kubernetes, it was in a pod has dead now. You need logs to be somewhere, right? So that's why, you know, Logstash, companies like Logstash, or these guys have introduced logs. It's not too expensive, but like also if you make it too noisy, then your machine itself is, begins to choke a bit. So that's probably a bigger reason to not do it versus expenses. All right, let's do one last round, guys. Akash, one last round. Okay, let's pause. Terraform. What's the question on Terraform? What is Terraform? Are we going to cover Terraform? Terraform is not part of the syllabus. Might come if people want. Again, we'll push it to the list of things, Akash. But yeah, not part of the syllabus at the moment, at the very least. And what is it if that's your question? Infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code kya hota hai? As the name suggests, letting you provision infrastructure as code. Okay, is your question how do you use Terraform here? Or provision alerts here using Terraform? And the answer is you can do it. I open a blog post at the beginning of the class. You'll find it somewhere here. All right, I'm going to take other questions as well. But yeah, I'm approaching placements in my college. Can you suggest me some tips to crack interviews based on your college time? Oh, college placements are usually DSA, right? I don't think there's anything else. I don't know if your college is any different, but I would assume not. DSA is the only thing you can prepare for, and just prepare for it very hard. No other advice, if I'm being honest. That's the only good advice for college placements. I've been working in a Salesforce company. Oh shit, I totally missed Vignesh's Notion. Let me first do that. Sorry, Vishnu's, my bad. Oh, PRs. Okie dokie. Let's see if they're good, like really good, then happy to. Questions. Actually, before you do all of that, where are you currently based? Where are you based? We are on-site company. Actually, I am based out of India and can work according to SF timings. Hi, where are you located? We are looking for someone in the Bay Area. Oopsie daisy. Unfortunately, Escape does not offer remote positions at this moment. Okay. Reach out to multiple companies, some of them in the pics. As soon as I say I'm from India, they either ghost or they say they only hire on site. I followed up with the messages, trial period, expected comms, none of them seem to be working. What can I do in this situation? Tricky situation to be. Good that you have so many screenshots. Even I can think what to do. What would I do if this was happening? How are you finding these companies, by the way? Is it like YC? A lot of YC companies are now like, on-site only, at least for the first few weeks or like first few months. Did that person revert on the message back for me? Akash, remind me to talk to, I forgot his name. The podcast guy, the anonymous podcast guy. I'll ask. It's been a month. He said a month ago, okay, they need people. So Akash will ask and basically get back to you. On this, there's nothing much you can do. Unfortunately, there's no advice that I can give either. You have to be really good at what you do and show them somehow. And then it won't matter what your location is. Question is, how do you do it? Open source is a way to do it, but I would assume most of these companies are not open source. You're showing them existing open source work. One thing you can try, which is just, again, trying. There's a good chance they still say no. But how would I try? I would, the standard clone their landing page, create a product very similar to them, what they're making, things like these, and throw a shot in the dark. Before, these questions even pop up. But again, these questions could again pop up, and this is out of your control. Basically, there's nothing you can do or I can do. Anyone who's interviewing can do if, they have an office and they're strict about people coming to office. I graduated 2 years ago and currently I don't have office in my hand. Can't help my family. Feel generally head down 100%, but sometimes you like break me. How can I cover this situation? Oh boy, 2 years is a long time. Let's look at your pull requests and based on that, see where you currently lie, and is it a skill issue or you don't have time issue, or not? You get the idea. Share. This is a good one, by the way, and it was also done in like less lines of code. I will review these, but let me just give a bounty on this one because this is something that was needed for a while. What I was saying was, keeping head down work. So okay, here is an example. Sujit is a great example. Okay, I am not saying you have to be really good, but it doesn't hurt to be really good. He picked up a very challenging problem of remote code. Try to work on it. Don't have expectations after that either. He does not either. But the point is, when you build something like that, it may be some you might hit a shot in the when a company that wants to build something similar needs a remote code execution engine, let's say, there's a very high probability that they would want to at least talk to that person irrespective of location. So basically my point is, for you, since you are you need a job urgently from what I can tell, rather than doing a lot of small issues, in case this is also good. I'm not saying these are small issues, these are also good. But my point is, pick a very challenging problem and go there. That's the only other advice I can give. It could be wrong as well. You might build something very challenging yet not get a job, but that is what I would do. Now I am in a different mental state than you are, and it might be very hard to do that and stick through a few weeks trying to build something very challenging. But that is the advice I would give. I hope it works. But things like these are almost out of your control unless you do something out of the ordinary, and show it to them. Yeah, that would be my advice. Can we do a status batch thingy for CMS? Yeah, fairly simple, right? Yeah, I mean, yes, you can do it. I guess your question is, can I contribute? Yes, you can. Do New Relic provide any endpoint for it? Oh, New Relic. I mean, these repository, none of these use New Relic. They won't either. New Relic will get sort of expensive here. So if at all, these will use Grafana in the future. So if you want to check something, check, if does Prometheus plus Grafana expose an endpoint like this? If not, incident.io works as well. I mean, just put that code there. All right. Hello, I've been working at Salesforce companies, not giving me projects for 5-6 months, and asked me for tedious tasks, even though I have the skills. I was scaling in the code, didn't get much time to contribute as I am really saturated, but have some full stack projects using the tech you've said. What should I do? What should I be focusing on? Can I switch to a company with 50K per month too if you connect me as well? 50. Alrighty. So firstly, 50, just give Akash take the details along with your GitHub resume and things like these. I don't think you can convince a very big company to, I've learned Next.js, now give me a Next.js project. So, I think things will stay the way they are there. You'll have to find work outside, which, standard Upwork, other gig delivery platforms or whatever, gig economy platforms. And, just start practicing there. I don't think you should hope for at all getting work on the stack that you recently became good at your company. But 50K INR, I would assume a month is great. If you are really good, then, I'm sure I'm not sure, but you can try to make something happen. Just give your details to Akash with, your resume, GitHub, things like these. 4.5 years of application security experience, and now I want to switch to a remote dev job. Will my previous experience help? For an AppSec job, it will. For a dev job, it doesn't matter. As long as you're good at what you do, doesn't matter what you did for 4.5 years. It's not as big of a kicker. So 4.5 years, you're a web developer. You can twist your experience a bit, but make sure you have the right skills. That's what matters. You can basically, yes. People with 1 year of experience are also getting a job, which means, or whatever you might be looking for, which means experience doesn't matter too much. Will it help you will it be an advantage for you? Maybe not. Bhaiya, placement. Okay, answer that. Bhaiya, please help me. Okay. Does New Relic uses headless by architecture? Oh boy. What is that? No, I have no idea what that is. A headless by architecture is different from a standard architecture because the semantic modeling layers are separated from the visualization layers. Basically, I don't know this at all. Headless by. What is it? What's it good for? Headless by, business intelligent, is one of the most recent developments in headless architecture trend. Its applications and benefits. Using headless architecture to accurately compile data and show the same results across various front ends isn't necessarily a new idea. What is headless by? Headless by is an architecture model that introduces a new layer to your data stack that sits in the middle of your data warehouse or database, and the tools that consume that information act as a single source of truth for interpreting raw data. The key aim of Headless Buy is to model the data and provide a consistent human naming convention for key metrics. MRR, ARR, is that like monthly recurring revenues? Before they enter your multiple buy and reporting tools. This seems like this is for Power Buy. That is what buy is over here. I was so confused. So no idea what this is. Most probably not. Are you saying, do they use this under the hood? Maybe. Like, does New Relic use this under the hood? Maybe. Maybe not. Oh shit, did I? It was right. I was just checking if my mic is correct or not. What is synthetic monitoring? This is another thing we will Google. Synthetic monitoring is the process using scripted transactions to simulate user behavior. Synthetic monitoring on website or an application to identify and fix performance issues before they affect users. Seems like it is a process to use to script transactions. Yeah, for what I can tell, which Google a bit, and don't trust me, I just read it with you right here. It seems like it's writing a bunch of scripts to simulate user behavior on a website. Basically means, I would assume, could be wrong, creating a bunch of browser instances, bringing them up, simulating human user behavior, which clicks on button, things like these, similar to end-to-end tests, but not actually end-to-end tests, but something that is testing the user behavior on production is what I would guess it is. We can Google a little bit more and understand if this is that or something else. No. Synthetic monitoring tools. A seamless end user experience is using a manager. Using you can easily record web transactions and replay recorded seeking played back in a browser. Oh, acha, this is that. This is probably, again, could be wrong. This is probably when a user comes, you can record their session and replay it. Is that anyone know already? Let me open chat and see if there is a smart person amongst us. Post hog, someone said. Oh, something like this makes sense. Yeah, the whole user journey being tracked somewhere. Is that it? Yeah, basically you will have to Google as much as I would. Let's see if there's something else. One more whispering curve, and then see Sharma. 2 more Notion docs, and then we'll call it, guys. Last 2 Notion docs for today. Notion doc 1, unfortunately did not open, sir. 2, repo is this one. Q&A UI. Since all 100 Java repos get crowded, you created something. In short, better chat for classes. Okie dokie. Class create. Okay. Is it generating summary from questions from the same user? I will have to read this. Order for Zoom chat the following features. Rate limiting attendees makes sense. Generate some. This is something that Zoom can give you, by the way. I think I could be wrong. We haven't used it any ways. Doesn't matter. It's not a problem anymore if I'm being honest. Like, not a lot of people spam. Generate summary for chats powered by Gemini. Summary for chats, as in summary for questions. I don't know if that's a great idea. Basically, this gets converted. The thing on the left got converted to the thing on the right, which, let's see. What a statement. Sorry. What is React? How can it be managed? It just merged the questions together. worth a shot, like try it out, but not in a main class, maybe in some side class where I'm doing some random experiments. Is this deployed somewhere? I would love to try it out. Just deploy it on, oh, they are deploying some random network, like, free network, and give Akash the URL. He will point it to me. Whenever I have a YouTube live, I will try it. If it is useful, there is some, use case there. Happy to do it. With that, let's see if the first Notion doc by Puneet is active or not. If it is, we will answer, else we will call it. On click. Oh, 7 months ago, due to layoff, job or company, but all seniors leaving the team. There's nobody had 7 months gap due to layoff. Okay, got a contract job at a product-based e-commerce company, but all the seniors are leaving the team. There's no way to help me put on call third day of joining. Also works in Java. I'm not able to cope up at par. Should I leave the job? Don't leave the job. That's not the answer. This is the best environment to learn. It can get overwhelming very quickly. I don't know, man. Try it for basically a month or two, and if still it is too bad, then maybe consider. But take it as a challenge rather, because if you do learn in such a, what's the word, intense environment, you are on call where you have just joined the company, don't even know Java, and the whole code base is in Java, and no one's there to guide you. You might learn a lot, and I would just worry about that, or take that as an outcome. Leaving the company, why? They're not paying decent, like 10 lakh. What is the guarantee you make much more in a different job in a niche that you like? Always, still keep trying it, but maybe for a month or two at the very least, try doing this and then go from there. With that, we will call it, guys. Thank you for joining. 9:30. I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll be doing Grafana. Have a good night. See you tomorrow.